sum up Trump's first 10 or so weeks back in the White House with 3 words. So, Benny, I'll start with you. 3 words to summarize it.
Yep, here we go. You ready?
Yep.
I've been thinking about this for a while, all right? So glad you asked. Deport Piers Morgan.
Well, Alex Jones tried. He failed. No, but to be serious, how would you summarize it? Give me 3 words to summarize how you think Trump has done so far.
Golden era energy.
Okay. Anna?
I'm so tired.
But my God, it is exhausting. Brian, 3 words.
You would have been deported under Kamala.
I would. Brian?
Ready, fire, aim.
What?
Using magic to explain logical inconsistencies is tight. Yeah, it is.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. Okay, we got another Piers Morgan debate coming in, as is customary for Saturdays and Sundays as well, in case you guys missed those. But we got a pretty good one. We got Benny Johnson, we got Anna Kasparian, and we got Brian Tyler Cohen. A pretty good spread here, and we're going to go a few places that you might not expect me to go, as a matter of fact. You guys all know my opinions. You know how I fall on these things. And as a matter of fact, just to give you a little bit of a spoiler alert, I will be disagreeing with Benny Johnson on this, and as a matter of fact, I will showcase Benny Johnson and then go over all the arguments as such. But before we do get into all this, I need you guys to do me a giant favor. Smash that like button for me. Subscribe if you're new around here. I would greatly appreciate that. And join the channel. As a matter of fact, that's the best way to help me out. You want to spread these videos. You like what you see here. You like the content that I bring. Let me know by joining the channel. Sharing this video is another good way to help me out. I would greatly appreciate that if you guys could do that. But without any further ado, let's go ahead and jump right on into this thing.
War plans for an imminent attack on foreign soil involving American military. To me, it's indisputably highly classified. Otherwise, what else is?
Especially
Brian,
in front of a journalist that hates you. Especially in front of a journalist that hates you. I hope that they find the person that added Jeffrey Goldberg and then that they fire him.
It was Mike
Because
Wolf.
I just think
It was Mike Wolf.
I can't imagine a stupider. I can't imagine a worse thing to do. I'm not going to defend that.
Okay.
Everyone knows that. All right. It's a mistake. That's a terrible mistake.
But we know who it was. I mean, Brian, let me bring in Brian. We know from the screen grab. It says added by Mike Wolf. So, by the way, Mike Wolf clarified last night on Laura Ingraham it wasn't a staffer. Brian, your final word on this, then we're going to change topic.
Look, again, I just want to dig into one misnomer that Benny is putting forward, this idea that it wasn't classified and so it's okay. This is some clever little trick that Republicans and Trump are trying to do. Trump is the ultimate classification authority, so he thinks that if he can just come forward and say, well, I'm declassifying it, then that will absolve everybody in retrospect. But they know full well that this kind of material, when you are talking about an imminent attack prior to it happening, notwithstanding the fact that Jeffrey Goldberg was there, notwithstanding the fact that it's on an unsecured app, but of course, by nature, this stuff is classified. And again, if Benny didn't have his head so far up the Republican Party's ass, he would be able to recognize that if somebody with a D next to their name was doing the exact same thing.
Well, to be fair to Benny,
I'm not really.
To be fair to Benny,
he
said it was a big mistake. Yeah. He said that there should be accountability. He's not tried to shirk away from that. He simply questioned whether we are the right arbiters for what is classified information. It's a reasonable point. The question will be, will there be a proper investigation to get to the bottom of it? I think it's indisputable. But
let me try something. Piers, please let me respond to that. Yes?
Sure.
Okay. So, Brian, you're not in charge of what's classified and what's not. Now, I'm perfectly happy to let all that play out. Let's fine. Do an investigation. Figure out what's classified and what's not. We know that Hillary Clinton had classified information on a private server and that she destroyed it. We know that. That's confirmed.
You're not even capable of not talking about Hillary Clinton, are you?
Okay, fine. Let's fast forward. Joe Biden. We know that he had classified information next to his Corvette.
Are you able to recognize the issue right in front of us instead of talking about previous Democratic presidents?
The question: is it wrong? Is it wrong for Hillary and Joe to do it?
Is it wrong for them to be reckless with classified information? Absolutely.
Yeah, we go.
It's not that hard.
Okay.
It's not that hard to take accountability for when somebody fucks up on your own side.
Okay, should something have happened to them? Yeah, and I'm saying that it was. I'm saying that I'm waiting for the classification to figure out what was What was
something
classified
did
and what wasn't.
happen. Something
The people
did
who are
happen to
responsible
both of
for
them.
that are saying that this
Well,
wasn't
something did
classified.
happen to both of them. They both lost elections.
And Signal.
Well, hang on. They both
Signal
lost
is
elections.
a app.
They both lost elections to Donald Trump soon after they were embroiled in classified information issues.
Okay, so what Benny Johnson needs to do, and a lot of people on the right they need to come to grips with this. Now, before Jeffrey Goldberg or whatever dropped that information that was quote-unquote war plans, but it, semantically saying that wasn't war plans, it was attack plans more specifically, but that's neither here nor there, that's semantics. But, before that, I was getting on the side of the administration saying, look, this is kind of a nothing burger. This dude is saying they release classified information, and he's not proving it. Well, as if pressed by the internet, he went ahead and proved it. Good for him. Glad he did so. What Benny Johnson should do, instead of playing whataboutery here, because that is whataboutery, as a matter of fact, whataboutism does not play well. What you do is you simply shut the conversation down by saying, yes, he should be fired. It was a bad thing. Hopefully they learn their lesson. Let's move on. That's all you got to do. Simply put, then you shut them down. You pull the fire out from underneath them. You take the wind out of their sails when you do this. But instead, you want us to talk about Hillary Clinton and then Joe Biden and blah, 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 and so on. There's a fine line between, whataboutism and hypocrisy, right? Just blatant hypocrisy. There's a fine line between that. And if it's a double standard you can prove, then go ahead, put that on display. But this isn't a double standard. It's totally different situations. Mike Walls should be fired outright. At this point, he should be. He come on Fox News, gave an interview with Laura Ingraham, and destroyed himself, in my view. Like, I had a totally different opinion. One day, I was talking good upon the administration about this. The next day, after seeing that interview, I'm like, the guy should be fired. Look, it's not going to piss me off, or I'm not going to cry about it if he doesn't get fired. That's Trump's decision to make. Sure, go ahead, fine, whatever. I don't care. I think it's a mistake, though. I think it's an outright mistake. But if we're going to sit here and pretend that administrations aren't going to make mistakes like this, then hang on, you're living in a dream world, my friends. And Brian Tyler Cohen, they're blowing this thing up. They're trying to make it this big old deal. They even called it Signalgate, for crying out loud, like as if it's a scandal. Now, it's a simple mistake that should be forgotten about by the next week. It should be, outright. It's not that big of a deal. The quote-unquote classified information wasn't really all that in-depth. It just gave a time when bombs were going to be dropped by F-18s. Who cares? It didn't say where. It said on Houthi targets, sure, but where? Just blatantly. Plus, it was leaked to a journalist, which, by the way, in case these people don't know this, right, this information sometimes gets intentionally sent to journalists to inform them of what the administration or what the army, whatever, what they're going to be doing. This happens all the freaking time. And these people are trying to drum this up like it's this giant scandal. It's really not. It really isn't. Is it a mistake? Sure. When it comes to national security interests, we cannot be making mistakes like this. Right? We could sit here and point out all the mistakes of the Biden administration, Hillary Clinton, the Obama administration, the previous Trump administration. We could point all those things out, but they're irrelevant to the situation. Just outright irrelevant. Let's keep going.
There was at least one case reported this week of a so-called member of this vile Venezuelan gang where they were identified.
Yeah, Trende Aragua, I think.
And there's one guy who's a sort of, who looks like the least likely member of a Venezuelan gang ever, who's this sort of gay, quite artistic bloke who seems to have been rounded up here. It seems on the face of it to be a complete miscarriage of any kind of justice without any due process. It's those kind of stories which I think are concerning people about the due process.
100%. And it was all because he committed the crime of having a tattoo. I mean, the reality is that if we're in a situation where even one of these people was one single person who should not be there gets sent off, that is a massive fuck up yet again in an administration that's shown that it's perfectly willing to commit them over and over and over again. But look, this is what so that none of us, so that Anna doesn't get rounded up, so that I don't get rounded up, so that Benny doesn't get rounded up. We cannot be in a situation.
Are you a
we
legal
cannot be in
American
a
citizen?
We cannot be in a situation where we're just allowing people to get deported because they have tattoos on their arms. This is why due
Piers,
process
this is
important.
really important.
Benny?
Piers, this is really because he just brought in something that is berserker mode. This is bizarre world. So are you asserting that the administration is deporting Americans, naturalized American citizens, or native-born American citizens? Is that what you're asserting?
I'm asserting that they are deporting people who are not criminal aliens.
Are you? So you're saying that Anna is here, and Anna, I totally agree with your last point, by the way. And I need to take an aside here. Anna's done incredible reporting on some of the horrific crimes that have been allowed to happen in this country. Some of them by criminal aliens, some of them by American citizens that don't get prosecuted. And so we cover that on my program. I just want to say thank you for doing that because it's an awful society. It's a zero trust society when you let criminals out of jail to do heinous crimes.
Okay, so that's the delusional dream world that a lot of leftists are living in right now. Currently, they believe that the Trump administration is going to go around and deport American citizens. It's ridiculous, as a matter of fact. Plus, these people, they never look into these cases anywhere past, oh, they're getting deported. That's it. Surface level, that's it. You look into this a little bit. The State Department, DHS, any of these organizations can, as a matter of fact, revoke green cards at any point for just about any reason. Now, the rationale for this is national security threat. They're trying to claim, oh, it's a First Amendment violation of this guy. Well, you know what? Criminal aliens plus actual legal residents like this, green card holders, visa holders, they don't get the exact same amount of rights that we do. If they start spouting a bunch of nonsense about supporting Hamas, you get deported if the administration feels it's a national security threat. Under this rationale, that is what it is. It's a national security threat under a threat of foreign policy decisions. That's what they're using on this, and they most certainly, pretty much arbitrarily have the right to revoke the citizenship. Now, this is going to go to a judge, and it has. It's going through a process. They fail to mention that on this thing. As a matter of fact, you have to actually try to stop it, though. You have to file suit to do this. Otherwise, if you say nothing, you'll just get deported. Now, that is your right to do so, and that is the State Department's right to deport you if you have no problems with that. That's what these people aren't getting. Oh, they're just going to go round up a bunch of citizens. That's ridiculous nonsense. It's drivel. That's partisan hackery, if you will. And these people have a pretty wide audience. Brian Tyler Cohen is insane, if you ask me. He has a pretty wide audience, and he spews this nonsense constantly. I watch videos from him from time to time, and dude, this guy just does not know his stuff. Like, he brings these legal experts on that are just other partisan hacks. It's like confirmation bias on top of confirmation bias here. It's like he brings in somebody that agrees with him and is going to say the things that he wants to hear to spew out to everybody on YouTube. It's ridiculous nonsense. Instead of actually getting some opposition to come in, somebody who's actually kind of fair, doesn't even have to really be opposition. Of course, in his mind, it's going to be opposition because he's a far leftist. And if you disagree with anything that they believe, you're far right. So from him, that's going to be somebody on the far right coming in. But, for everybody else, it could be just a centrist, somebody to come in and actually interpret the law, how these other people are going to interpret this, look up the actual statutes that are being invoked instead of just saying, oh, they're deporting American citizens, legal permanent residents. Sorry about that. Couldn't say residents for some reason, but it's just a bunch of ridiculousness. And I just got to point all this stuff out. As a matter of fact, Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State, has the right to revoke green cards, visas, all of the like, all of it, at any point for just about any reason. They can make up a reason if they want to, and when it goes to court, they can just say this. They don't have to bring much evidence because they reserve that right to designate who comes into this country and doesn't. Let's keep going.
Waste. They are finding a lot of evidence of abuse and so on. But they're also firing a lot of people. And Musk is now being targeted with companies like Tesla, with people, who used to support him vociferously, now turning on him and burning Teslas and so on and so on. So I guess my two questions would be, is Doge washing its face? Is it proving its point enough to justify it? And how long do you think Elon Musk is going to put up with the damage to his existing businesses if they carry on being as pretty devastating as they've been with Tesla? Do you think there's a chance he walks away from this?
I don't know if Elon Musk is even tempted to walk away from what he's doing. It seems like he gets a lot of enjoyment out of triggering people who are upset at the potential of losing certain entitlements that they have paid into their entire lives. The Social Security Administration is really suffering right now, and we're talking about the entitlement program that working Americans paid into their entire working lives, and now recipients of Social Security are unable to get a live person to talk to if they haven't received their Social Security check. 7,000 people were fired, and 10 field offices for the Social Security Administration were shut down as a result of Doge's actions. And I see this as a roundabout way of dismantling an incredibly popular, wildly popular government program that Republican voters absolutely love without having to even pass a single piece of legislation. So this is the Trump administration's way of dismantling it without having to deal with Congress. This has been considered the third rail of politics because of how popular Social Security is. If they either privatize it, shut it down, or essentially take away these entitlement benefits from Americans who paid into the system, there will be hell to pay for the Republican Party, not just the Trump administration, likely for decades to come. They're really playing with fire on that issue. We'll see what happens. But the final thing I'll say is I condemn anyone who engages in any violence, including burning, firebombing Teslas, attacking people simply because they drive Teslas. People who do that are absolute scum, and they're counterproductive to the peaceful protesters who have been, protesting outside of Tesla dealerships or whatever. They have every right to do that. And those people are not the same as the scummy individuals who are causing real violent acts and damage to, these dealerships.
Just to get this out of the way right quick, it's okay when they come out and they condemn all this violence, but it really is truly ridiculous and makes absolutely no sense. But the far left never makes any sense. They're just itching to find something to destroy because that's what their MO is. As a matter of fact, they just want to destroy stuff, and they're going at Tesla just because Elon Musk is doing something with the federal government. Makes absolutely no sense. I would love to see them try this with SpaceX, but hey, once again, like I said, I'm going to get that out of the way right quick. Now, she goes on about Social Security and all this nonsense. Well, you know what? They're not cutting any benefits whatsoever. People are supposedly getting scared about this. Well, they have nothing to be scared over. They're not cutting any benefits. That would be political suicide, as a matter of fact. And, you could argue that, Trump can't get reelected again, blah, blah, blah. Well, hang on, leftists. I thought y'all said he was going to try to run for a third term. Anyway, makes no sense on that. But, shutting down some of these Social Security Administration offices, now all of a sudden the left, they're getting out there and saying, oh, this is bad. They're going through so many problems. Well, you know what? You know what they don't tell you about that is the Social Security Administration was suffering all these issues under the Biden administration, under the Trump administration, under the Obama administration, under the Bush administration, under the Bush administration, under the Clinton administration. As a matter of fact, they were suffering these issues for a very, very, very long time. And I can't stand this idea. They always put this out there that Social Security is so popular. People would be so mad if you got rid of it. I can almost guarantee you the only reason it is quote unquote so popular is simply because we pay so much into it. If people were given the opportunity to take what they've paid into it and put it into a 401k like retirement plan, I bet you they would do it in an instant. Almost guaranteed, almost all the way across the board. I imagine some people wouldn't, but most people would. Or if given the ability, not pay into it at all. Right? If Social Security didn't exist, nobody would give a damn about it. I know, because it doesn't exist, right? But what I'm getting at here is I imagine that if given the opportunity, people would much rather control their own money, put it into whatever stocks and bond, whatever you want to put it into, manage your money however the hell you want to, instead of having the government manage your money for you. I imagine that the vast majority of Americans would agree with this. So that's getting behind this idea that Social Security is so popular. Yeah, I don't think it's as popular as people make it out to be. Once again, I would take that money in an instant, and pretty much everybody I know that I've ever asked this to agrees. They would much rather that be privatized, in other words. Now, that might sound scary to a lot of people, but that's essentially what that would be. Like, if it's still going through the government to do this, kind of doesn't make any sense. Right? This would actually expand financial management, the financial management industrial complex, if you want to call it that. But this would expand that rapidly and vastly, right? Given the ability that allow these people to put their own money into, a 401k-esque like type of retirement plan, right? Let them do that themselves. And I bet you nobody would give a damn if Social Security went bye-bye, because you would get a lot more money out of it, right? I imagine a lot of people would put that Social Security money into cryptocurrencies, right? If given the ability to have done that a long time ago. People's retirements would be insane right now if, the vast majority of the country was allowed to put their retirement, their Social Security money into Bitcoin. There would be a lot more millionaires in this country currently. But, people aren't responsible with their money, and the government thinks that, they're going to be more responsible. Well, you know what? Social Security is failing. It just doesn't work. It takes 4 people to pay into Social Security to make 1 outgoing payment. The numbers don't work. And anytime you have any social programs, right? So this is why socialism, communism, none of it works. It's because the math doesn't work on any of this nonsense. But that's an aside. They're not cutting any benefits, right? They're trying to go through and find the fraud, the waste, the abuse in Social Security, right? There's plenty of government watchdogs that estimate $250 to $500 billion a year just disappear. We don't know where it goes. That doesn't mean it's fraud. That doesn't mean it's stolen. We just don't know where it goes, and we would like to. This is what Elon Musk, they're trying to account for all the dollars that are unaccounted for. Most Americans, if you go up to them and ask them outright, would you like to know where the United States government spends 100% of its dollars? I imagine 100% of people would be like, yeah, we need to know these things, right? Maybe not personally, but that information needs to be there. The government, the watchdogs, whatever it may be, need to know this information. Nobody would say, yeah, I don't think, sure, that's fine if they don't know where $500 billion a year goes to. Or even go with the low number, $250 billion a year. Nobody would say that. So this is very popular. The people that are making it unpopular are the very same people that are complaining about it in the first place, which is lovely. Let's keep going.
Maybe just slow the horses down a little bit to make sure that as you roll out these very, very big things, you're not letting Americans who don't deserve it slip through the net, either being deported wrongly, losing Social Security wrongly, being fired wrongly, etc.
Well, look, I would say the easy analysis of this is to say that they're incompetent. And I do think that they're incompetent to a degree. But I also think that in large part, this is what they
Elon
want
Musk
to
isn't
do.
incompetent, is he? I mean, let's be clear. He's one of the most brilliant minds in America.
Which brings me to my second point, is in large part, this is what they want to do. I mean, they'll trot out their talking points, and Benny brought out one of these things that, they're looking to just get the debt under control. They're adding money to the deficit, which is going to explode the debt even further. And so like this notion that we're just getting our spending under control, they needed to try to cut a little bit so that they can, including Medicaid and food stamps, $880 billion in energy and commerce, which will cut Medicaid, $230 billion in the Agriculture Committee, which will cut food stamps to try and offset just a fraction of what they're going to add by virtue of $4.5 trillion for a tax cut that's overwhelmingly going to favor millionaires and billionaires. So we can say that they're incompetent for some of the egregious things that they're doing, but in large part, they're doing exactly what they want to do. They're not focused on the debt. They're not focused on trying to help people or make sure that they have adequate health care or grow, add jobs or whatever it is. They are doing what they need to do for the people that they're looking to help. And that is overwhelmingly people who are exactly like Elon Musk. And by the way, Piers, I would take issue with how you framed Elon, because he's not doing this as some benevolent patriotic figure.
Well, he's not being paid.
He was under investigation by nearly every single agency that he and Donald Trump have gutted, whether through gutting the agency itself or firing the inspectors general. Department of Labor, NLRB, USAID, CFPB, EPA, and so this isn't some indication of like benevolence by this patriotic figure.
But hang on,
He's helping himself. He's deriving being
investigated or even sued. That's perfectly reasonable, normal business practice. It's whether those investigations or lawsuits lead to anything being actively overturned or then being punished for it. Trump is already on the record as saying, look, I will accept the ruling of judges on these things if we get challenged, but I'm not going to be blasted off my mission statement I made as a candidate. Many people would say, and I think there's merit to this, Trump is doing exactly what he said he'd do. And you might quibble whether they're going to reduce the debt or not. You can't tell after 10 weeks whether an administration can reduce the debt. You can after 2 years, and if they haven't reduced the debt after 2 years, then they're going to get a shellacking in the midterms and probably get a shellacking in the next general election. But I do think trying to assess whether what they're doing at the moment can reduce the debt is a bit preposterous after only, 10 weeks?
Well, it's not preposterous if you have the CBO score that shows exactly how much is going to be added to the debt. And so again, if you're passing it, I mean, it's just math, right? If you're cutting programs that don't amount to as much as you're adding by virtue of these tax cuts, then you are going to add to the deficit, and that's going to balloon the debt, which is to say nothing, by the way, of the amount of federal revenues that are shrinking by virtue of the fact that the economy is doing poorly right now.
What's fascinating about this is he's coming out here talking about, well, he hasn't done nothing for the debt yet. And, kind of like Piers said, well, he just came in, for crying out loud. But you know what? That's also a red herring, because they're not going after the debt. They're going after the deficit. That's where the problem is, the deficit spending. It's not necessarily the debt. If you can get rid of the deficit spending, the debt will flatline. Then, once we get into a good position, start growing the economy a little bit more, then we can start thinking about the debt. It's the long game on this. It really is. That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to get the deficit under control so we can stop the debt from growing. They're not trying to cut the debt at all. Not right now. That's not how this thing is going to work. You cannot just come in and instantly, I love how they say, oh, the economy's terrible, when just 2-3 months prior, the economy was great. Look at the stock market, y'all. Like, it's insane that these people think the economy is just a switch you can flip. Then all of a sudden, it's bad. No, you've got to be a little bit, at least intellectually consistent on this and say the economy has been bad for a very long time, right? The deficits have been bad for decades, ever since the 90s. I yell about this all the time in my videos. I talk about this, that, somehow, miraculously, back in the 90s, they were able to balance the budget. We can do that again. However, it's not it's not like instant oatmeal or something. You can't just, fill a bowl with some water and throw it in the microwave and then dump your deficit on that and think it's going to fix itself. Not when it's 1.7 or 1.8 trillion dollars. As a matter of fact, they have fixed the deficit in just this short amount of time, right? They knocked off several $1 billion off of the deficit, which is amazing that they've done that in just 2 months. That's amazing. But once again, it's $1.7 trillion. That is an absurd number. It really is. And it's just absurd that nobody ever talks about the Biden administration, how much they raised the deficit. They over doubled the deficit, my guys. Over doubled it, y'all. Seriously. Under Donald Trump, it was $984 billion. That's with COVID spending, by the way. That was the last deficit right at the end of his term with COVID spending, $984 billion. Instantly, the very next fiscal year, under Joe Biden, that increased to $1.5 trillion. And you think he might have thought, increasing the deficit by 50%, over 50%, as a matter of fact, might be a bad thing. What did Joe Biden think? No, let's increase it even further. Then it went up to $1.7 trillion. Then it went up to $1.8 trillion and stayed at $1.8 trillion. It would have been, get this, y'all, get this, $2.2 trillion if it was not for the Supreme Court stopping Joe Biden's insane, unconstitutional, if you want to go there, student loan forgiveness program. Yes, $2.2 trillion. That would have been almost 3 times the budget. The deficit, I'm sorry. 3 times the deficit. And I love this argument coming from these people. You know, these quote-unquote tax cuts. They're only going to add more debt. These tax cuts that disproportionately help billionaires. Love this argument. Nobody ever gives me a good argument against this. Because I thought, hang on, guys. You are the same people that are always arguing the rich don't pay taxes at all, for crying out loud. They live off of their stocks. They borrow money off of their wealth. So they can't get taxed on it. So how are they paying taxes? So how are these tax cuts going to disproportionately help these people? Nobody can ever answer that illogical or logical inconsistency. Nobody can ever answer that. Like, somebody give me a good answer on that. How are they going to help these people if they're not even paying taxes at all? If they're not, quote unquote, paying their fair share? It's just insane. And, you know, cutting the government just isn't instant, by the way. And what else is funny about this is, okay, so Donald Trump is trying to come in. He's trying to fire a bunch of people. He's trying to cut all this spending. These people are complaining that it's not helping yet. Oh, it hasn't done anything yet. But it's the same Democratic Party that is suing the Trump administration into oblivion to stop him from doing it. You gotta love that, y'all. You really do. They're stopping him from doing what is necessary to get us back to fiscal responsibility, and then they get on social media, they get on these programs on YouTube and say he's not doing anything to help the debt. Ugh. How about some intellectual consistency on this, y'all? Seriously. Let's keep going.
Seen this big row, obviously, recently about the Columbia University student who was alleged to be pro-Hamas. It seems to be a bit of a foggy picture as to whether he was or not. But this principle of deporting students for their political allegiances or views, where do you sit on that? Bernie Sanders says this is not democracy. You can't exile political dissidents, not in the United States.
Well, I mean, our government will certainly try to do that as long as the government of Israel demands it. And our government, whether you're talking about Democrats or Republicans, is completely controlled by the Israeli government, and they're going to do the Israeli government's bidding. That's what this is really about. That's all it is. So protesters who are legal residents, permanent residents who have green cards, will be deported simply for exercising their freedom of speech and criticizing how the Israeli government is prosecuting this war in Gaza, slaughtering tens of thousands of innocent women, children, elderly people, civilians. They're going to continue the slaughter. They don't want any backlash from anyone in the United States about it, including American citizens, including permanent residents. And remember, Miriam Adelson and the Adelson family overall gave Donald Trump hundreds of millions of dollars to not do what's right for the United States, but to do what's right for Israel. So Donald Trump is going to do that. He's transactional. Money talks for him, and he doesn't care. He'll go ahead and revoke green cards and deport valedictorians, students who have been in this country since they were 7 years old, were valedictorians in high school. But God forbid they ever ding or criticize the Israeli government, because that's when they'll become a target.
What if they actively support? What if they actively support Hamas?
Look, I despise Hamas, and it disgusts me that anyone would say anything positive about Hamas. But our freedom of speech indicates that we are allowed to even be supportive of the KKK, be supportive of Nazis, be supportive of terrorists.
But that applies to American naturalized citizens. If you've come in on a green card, right? If you say on your green card you support a organization that is a prescribed terror group in the United States, you don't get your green card. That is the argument Marco Rubio made. I thought it was quite a good one. I mean, I haven't got a green card, but I have a visa. And they're very stringent about all these kind of things, right? If you aligned
Visas
yourself
and green cards
with a terror
Piers,
group,
you know that.
If you aligned yourself with a terror group, you wouldn't get in. So why should you stay in?
Well,
is my
visa
point.
and a green card is hold on, Piers, hold on. Visa and green card is different, as you know.
Course, yeah.
Someone who's a permanent legal resident is, it's like one tiny step lower than a naturalized citizen. And the point is, whatever allegation the Trump administration is making against these green card holders, it needs to be adjudicated by a judge. Again, it goes back to the issue of due process. If you guys are comfortable with an executive branch official, simply one person unilaterally deciding without any due process that someone has done something wrong and now their green card should be revoked, I think that's setting a really, really bad and dangerous precedent. Again, that concentrates too much power among a very small group of people, and I think people deserve due process. Have a judge weigh in and determine whether or not this person is actually a threat to the United States or our national security, and then make that decision. But
Penny,
for some reason, they don't want to do that.
All right.
I just find it hilarious. Her Israeli derangement syndrome is poking through right there. If you can't make the argument without invoking Israel, then what are you doing, as a matter of fact? And she goes on to make all these statements about this guy, Muhammad, I don't know his freaking name. Under the law, as we discussed earlier, the Secretary of State has the right, DHS has the right to revoke your status in this country, your green card, your visa, whatever it may be, your legal protected status. They have the right to revoke that for just about any reason they deem necessary. That's what that is. If you want that changed, go to Congress, right? There is no legal recourse in a lot of these cases. If they deem it's a national security threat, then hey, so be it. Once again, deport these people. I don't care. I am perfectly fine with an arbitrary decision to get rid of a single individual that, as a matter of fact, we know were inciting protests that got violent, as a matter of fact. Whether he was physically involved with that or not, that doesn't matter. Doesn't matter whatsoever. Under the law, if you put together a protest and it turns into a riot, you can get in trouble for that as an American citizen. So to think that there is no reason or no rhyme to deport somebody, there is evidence to show that he supports Hamas, as a matter of fact. So, we should just go with that. We don't need to be harboring terrorist sympathizers, for crying out loud. I just don't get that. I don't think that these people need to be, coddled or anything like that. They want to get deported, deport these people. It's America first up in here, y'all. I really don't care. If you want to come to this country, then you obey the rules of this country. Once again, this is about America. You don't get to come to this country and then start going around trying to change people's minds. You don't get the exact same rights that everybody else does as a citizen. Right? If you just have a green card, you don't have the full protection of the Bill of Rights, for crying out loud. You do get a significant amount, but you don't get the full-on protection. And I totally agree with that. Once again, we do have enemies in this world, and when people start acting in such a manner that causes harm to American citizens, I think we need to closely look at and think about getting rid of those people, especially if they're not, once again, if they're just here, blah, 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 just temporarily. I don't see why we should keep these people whatsoever. We've had so many criminal aliens come into this country. We've had so many people come into this country, and we have so many enemies out there. And, look, hey, there's an argument to be made that we have enemies for good reason. We've done a lot of bad things on the world stage. Totally agree with that. However, this is more about protecting us. It's not the American citizens that went out and started regime change wars all over the damn world, right? The government was doing that without our approval, for crying out loud. So we technically were responsible for that, but we didn't know what was happening. There was nothing we could do about it to stop it at the time. So to endanger the citizenry over something the government did, decades or even 6 months ago, doesn't matter. That, I think that the government should step in and get rid of possible threats. That's just how I see it. I don't see any problem with that. Once again, you got to look at it from a logical perspective. If you go to another country and start advocating on behalf of enemies to that country, what do you think is going to happen? That's all you got to do. Seriously, that's all you got to do. I mean, think about that for a second. It would be ridiculously stupid of these countries to keep you there, to allow you to stay and keep on spewing this nonsense rhetoric. You can scream First Amendment all you want to, but it has nothing to do with the First Amendment. Once again, you can hold the opinions that you want. We're not stopping you from holding opinions. It's when you get out and you start inciting violence, you start getting out and rallying people up, that turns into something violent, that turns into something that could threaten U.S. citizens. That's a step beyond speech, for crying out loud. It really is. Plus, once again, you don't get those same full protections as a green card, visa holder, whatever it may be. I find this funny. I just find it funny that these people are advocating this on a freedom of speech charge instead of on what it actually is. Looking at the actions of these people. It's not been just this one guy. There's been several of these people that started these protests, these pro-Palestinian, pro-Hamas protests on these college campuses. Like, that's just ridiculous. Look what happened during those protests. That's all we got to do. These people started those, right? Think about that for a second. You've got a foreigner coming into this country, then they go to a college campus where young minds are getting filled with all kinds of nonsense already coming from the left. They're being ideologically brainwashed in some cases. And then you get these people coming in, and then they start this protest that turns violent, that teaches these kids to do this, to get out there and occupy buildings. It's like, what? I really don't care at this point. I seriously don't care. Now, if it was somebody that was just coming into this country, went to school, and was minding his own business, yeah, I would probably be like, yeah, that's not a good thing. It's bad on the administration to do that. Yeah, if they're minding their own business, but clearly this guy wasn't. That's just what I have to say about the facts of this situation. But I think I've rambled on for long enough on this one. I want y'all to let me know what y'all think about all this down in the comment section, because once again, I'm interested to get y'all's insight. What do you think about this? You think I'm wrong about some of this? You think I'm right? Do you think I don't go far enough with some of my opinions? Let me know what you think. That's all I got for this one. Y'all don't forget to smash that like button for me. Subscribe to this channel. Share this video anywhere and everywhere you can. Sign up to become a member. You could be the first one. Hey, you never know, folks. But that's all I got on this one. I want to thank everybody for watching. And y'all try to have a good day. Stay legitical. Peace.